Tennessee, Mr. Kustoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here this afternoon and this morning. Since the enactment of Dodd-Frank almost 6-7 years ago, to me it's incredible that we have had very few new banking starts in this country. Mr. Allison, if I could, with your banking experience, can you talk from a practical and procedural standpoint today, if you wanted to start a new bank, which I can tell from the expression that you're not particularly interested in doing that, what are the real world hurdles and challenges that Dodd-Frank presents to somebody who would want to start a new bank today?
The biggest challenge is the regulators don't want you to start a bank. So they're going to come up with every obstacle they can dream of to start a bank. And then secondly, when you do your cost analysis and your profit analysis, you're going to say, I can't make any money because I'm going to have to hire an army of compliance people before I can make my first loan. So I'm going to be embedded with a cost structure radically higher than a traditional community bank startup has. And this is very interesting. The ability to sell your bank, it sounds like that will consolidate the industry, but actually it encourages startups because a lot of banks are built to run for 25 or 30 years, kind of the life expectancy of the board and the management, and then to be sold. So the fact we've made it hard for people to sell their banks, ironically, is not kept banks from being sold, it's kept banks from being started because that's the payback. I can't get a high enough return in the short term, but 10 or 15 or 20 years down, I'll be able to sell the bank, and that's kind of when my management talent's going to run out, and I'm not going to be able to hire enough people to replace me. Kind of mindset.
Well, I mean, the converse. Let's assume that we get the Choice Act passed in toto, the way that it's written now. Can you predict what that would do for new bank starts in this country?
I would predict a significant increase in the number of new bank starts, a pretty radical, because all they got to meet is a 10% equity requirement, which is really not that hard, and then they will have the option in the future, if they do well, to sell it. And that's the kind of, the carrot out there. So I think you'll see a significant increase in number of startups, and I think that'll be good for the economy.
Thank you, Mr. Allison. Dr. Michelle, you and I had the opportunity, I believe, to talk earlier at our subcommittee hearing, and I do want to ask you, if I could, about the CFPB for a moment and the consumer complaint database, if we could. The way I understand it, that when complaints are submitted to the database, we've seen that the facts are not verified. In other words, the complaints are submitted, there's no verification. So somebody could submit a complaint. It may be valid, maybe not valid, and maybe partially valid. Can you, if you could, talk about how the CFPB can ensure the validity of these claims before they're submitted and placed in the public domain?
Sure. Just find out what happened before you put it on the public database. The FTC has a similar model where those things are kept internally and they verify the complaints internally. And I mean, this isn't supposed to be about public shaming and finding out later, oh, we made a mistake. I mean, that's what purpose does that serve if we're talking about protecting people?
And following up on that, do you believe or have an opinion as to whether the CFPB should remove these complaints from the public domain rather than keep the database as
Sure.
is?
Yeah, no, I don't see any public purpose to having all of that raw complaint information public. It's counterproductive.
And how would the CFPB go about verifying these complaints once they're submitted?
Well, if we have a federal agency that is an enforcement agency and they're doing their job, when they receive a complaint, they check it out, they verify it. They talk to the person who filed the complaint, they talk to the company that the complaint is filed against, and they go and actually investigate what happened. I don't think anybody would have a problem with that.
Do you have any idea how many complaints have been submitted to the CFPB?
I have not looked lately. I know that it was millions at some point. I don't know. I could not give you a number now. No, I have not looked lately.
And again, none of those complaints have been verified. They are simply
But
submitted.
they were simply submitted raw complaint data, yeah. And I don't have the error rate off the top of my head either. But I know that they have made some statements about how many of those were not actually verified complaints.
Thank you, Dr. Michelle. I yield back my time.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from New York, Ms.